Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call to order the August 8th, 2022 council meeting. Jenny, will you please call roll?
Ms. Aludo?
Here.
Ms. Ambrose Grooms?
Here.
Vice Mayor DeRosa?
Here.
Mayor Fox?
Here.
Mr. Keeler?
Here.
Ms. Cram?
Here.
Mr. Reiner?
Here.
Councilman Keeler, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? This evening, we have a special presentation. I would like to invite Christine Nardecchia, our Director of Outreach and Engagement, to come forward and introduce us to an exciting new role called the Heritage Interpreters. Christine?
Well, good
Welcome.
evening, members of council, and thanks for taking a moment out of this evening's agenda to introduce some members of this new community role of volunteer engagement. As the Ferris Wright property was being developed, we were challenged to think about a docent type of role and thought that fit really well into our learn and serve philosophy of volunteer engagement. And so it was assigned to some terrific staff leads. Tonight we have with us volunteer coordinator Shannon Maurer, nature education specialist Sarah Esela, and it's all under the watchful expert eyes of nature education coordinator Barbara Ray. So last fall, we began holding visioning sessions for this. And really came up with the purpose statement of these heritage interpreters because it's a role that's never existed before in the city. And the whole idea is to develop a learned group of folks who will host guided tours in the interpretive building through educational programs, hikes, and activities. The heritage interpreters interpret the historical importance of the site, encourage reflection of Dublin as our home, and really importantly, reflect diversity principles in discussing our Native history and engaging with community members. In order to develop the curriculum, which is really robust and quite a time commitment, the interpreters, along with Shannon, Sarah, and Barbara, decided that the visitors, the goal and takeaways, what the visitors would deepen their connection with Dublin as home through the following ways: by engaging with the history of Dublin's Native people and early settlers, appreciating the park's natural beauty, asking all of those who visit to reflect on their identity as a Dublin community member, and ask our residents and visitors to share their stories with the Dublin community. So this training has been going on all winter and spring with a summer kickoff that's both hands-on and comprehensive with experts, not only locally, but around the country. They spent 40 plus hours in a training curriculum, and that's on paper. I would argue it was double that with the amount of passion and interest these folks have in this topic through in-person workshops, online curriculum with everything from Dublin's ties to ancient peoples, in-depth study on the Adena, Hopewell, Wyandotte, Eastern Shawnee, the history of the Ferris Wright and holders. They even know their family charts, and have been using resources such as the Ohio Kerwin Institute and Ohio History Connection in order to conduct programs like this, spear and arrow throwing. So they're pretty expert at that. This summer, they began open house tours. The plan is to do them for 2 weekends per month, Saturdays and Sundays. I will say that this summer's weather has not cooperated. I'm not sure if that's a larger meaning or not, but the next scheduled one is on September 17th of this year. And I am going to flash the names of the folks who have agreed to serve in this role: Ann Bowman, Kay Cragg, Jody Zernanen, Carl Gleditch, Carol Harmon, Charles Harmon, Judy Hirschfield, Carrie Middleton, and Perry Orange. And I believe Mr. Orange is going to come up to the podium and say a word or two.
Okay, thank you, Christine. Mayor Fox and all the members of the council, we want to tell you how much we appreciate this recognition for what's going on at Ferris Wright Park. It really means a lot to us to be here tonight. I've heard it said that if you want real passion and engagement, find a volunteer. And that's certainly what we have here, what I've seen among my colleagues, just a immeasurable passion for learning this material. Passion without knowledge, though, certainly would fall short. So I want to emphasize something Christine said about the curriculum. It was remarkable. The depth and breadth of what was shared with us, again, remarkable, and it would be a crime not to acknowledge, again, people like Shannon Maurer and Sarah Asala and the live programs that were facilitated by Barbara Ray and Mary Gordon were invaluable to what we've learned as we've gone along. And I know that they didn't do that alone. They had help from people like Tom Holton, if you know him. He is Dublin history to me anyway. And he gave quite a bit of input, and not least of which is the Holder Wright family, with whom, with none of this, we wouldn't be talking about this today. I want to tell you just real quick about a couple of pieces of feedback that I got recently. Carl and I were manning the Heritage Center out of Ferris Wright, and I heard two things that I think are going to be common themes. One was, I never knew. People were saying, I've lived here 15, 20, 30 years, had no idea that this kind of rich heritage going back thousands of years was in my backyard. And even that I pass it every day going down Emerald Parkway. I never knew. And secondly, what a hidden gem this is. That was in reference not only to that historical value of what's there at Ferris Wright, but also the natural beauty, Billingsley Creek and the area around it. People have no idea that it's so beautiful back there. I think those are going to be common themes, what we're going to be hearing as we're out there. And I think it gives us a unique and pleasurable opportunity to make sure that our gems become more of a well-known part of Dublin's history as it unfolds and moves forward. So once again, want to thank all of you for having us here and for recognizing the work that's being done there. If you haven't been there yet, get there. It's fascinating and you'll love it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I had the opportunity to see the heritage interpreters firsthand when the Wyandotte Nation came with a group of their youngsters, teenagers, interns, and they come back here to Dublin once a year to see Scioto Park. And there you were, surprised me, because I didn't realize we had heritage interpreters until I had an opportunity to hear you tell your stories to the Wyandotte Nation about their ancestors here in Dublin. It was fascinating. They were fascinated. I know the young people really appreciated understanding. It's almost like when any of us go back to the roots of our homeland, we've never been there before, and someone is there to explain what it was like back then when their great-grandfathers or great-great-grandparents were there. And it was a beautiful experience, and that visitor experience, I'm sure, is something they'll remember for a long time. So it's a wonderful group, and we thank you very much for volunteering to do it. Now, this is the period of time during our meeting that we have citizen comments, and it's an opportunity for citizens to comment on any topic that is not on our tonight's agenda. Is there anyone here present that wishes to speak to council tonight or have any comments been received online? No? Thank you. Following this is our consent agenda. Is there a request to remove any item, council, from the consent agenda this evening? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
A second, please.
Second.
Thank you. Jenny, will you please call roll?
Mr. Keeler,
Yes.
Ms. Cram,
Yes.
Ms. Aludo,
Yes.
Mr. Reiner,
Yes.
Mayor Fox,
Yes.
Vice Mayor DeRosa,
Yes.
Ms. Ambrose Grooms.
Yes.
Second reading, public hearing on ordinances. Ordinance 28-22.
Authorizing the provision of certain incentives to Ray and Associates, Inc. to induce it to purchase a facility to retain and expand its corporate headquarters and its associated operations and workforce, all within the city, and authorizing the execution of an economic development agreement.
Thank you. Our staff report this evening is from our Economic Development Director, Jennifer Cluse.
Good evening, members of council. As you will recall, we have been working with Ray and Associates on their expansion project. Ray and Associates has reached capacity at its Dublin facility, and as a result, they have been conducting a competitive real estate search for expansion opportunities in several central Ohio communities. Ray and Associates is a full-service regional accounting and business advisory firm. Recently, they were named a Best of Accounting winner by Clearly Rated for the third year in a row. The proposed incentive is for 18% on income tax withholdings over 7 years, valued up to $283,000 in consideration of the company's continued investment and planned workforce growth in Dublin. Here with us this evening is Doug Hauser, Regional President and Director of Construction and Real Estate Services. He will be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you to the mayor and the council here. We've been very proud to call Dublin home for quite a few years. Our first building in Dublin was built in 1984, lasted about 15 years, built another building now on Perimeter Drive in 2000. So that's been 22 years. And hopefully look forward to that and then some with our new building that we're looking at renovating and purchasing here. So our firm is an old firm. We've been around since 1938. We very much value the communities in which we're located. The four cornerstones of our mission and values are people, clients, growth, and firm. And we feel that Dublin has always been very much aligned with us along those lines, and it allowed us to serve our people, our clients, and to grow and be a part of this community. We remain very proud of our history here and certainly want to see that continue. So I thank you for Jennifer and the economic development team. They've been great to work with, and certainly thank you for your consideration. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
All right. We will see if there's any public comment, and then if council has any comments or questions for you, we'll open it up to them. Are there any public comments? All right, council, comments, questions for Mr. Hauser? Well, we welcome you. You have been here a very long time. Ray and Associates is a longstanding name in our community, and we really appreciate your loyalty to this community and the partnership that you've given us. And we're excited that you're growing and you're staying here with us. So
Thank you.
So we really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ordinance 29-22. Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped ahead. Jenny, will you please call roll?
Ms. Ambrose Grooms,
Yes.
Mr. Keeler,
Yes.
Vice Mayor DeRosa,
Yes.
Mayor Fox,
Yes.
Ms. Cram,
Yes.
Mr. Reiner,
Yes.
Ms. Aludo.
Yes.
Ordinance 29-22.
Authorizing the provision of certain incentives to CPS Solutions LLC to induce it to lease a facility to retain and expand its office and its associated operations and workforce, all within the city, and authorizing the execution of an economic development agreement.
Our staff report, once again, is Jennifer Cluse.
Members of council, as you will recall, we have been working with CPS Solutions, one of the nation's leading providers of pharmacy and hospital solutions, on the expansion of their company here in Dublin. The proposed incentive is 20% on income tax withholdings over 3 years, valued at $83,000. Here with us this evening is Larry Kabiska, Vice President, Patient Care Services. He will be happy to answer any questions you have.
Good evening. It's nice to meet all of you. Thank you for having us here. We appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. I'm Larry Kabiska with our Patient Care Service Center with CPS. Comprehensive Pharmacy Services has been around about 50 years. Originally started in Memphis and then lots of acquisitions over the years, and we relocated our corporate headquarters here to Dublin about 3 years ago. We had merged with PSI, which was here in Dublin for about 20 years before that, I think. Our expansion this time is our Patient Care Services Center, and what we do at Patient Care Services is the front-end legwork for specialty pharmacies to help patients to find foundation and copay assistance for expensive drugs. We coordinate adherence so that they maintain their therapies and get better. And then thirdly, the big thing that our pharmacists do is the clinical monitoring of patients' therapy to ensure that they're getting not experiencing adverse effects and meeting their goals of therapy and meeting the treatment outcomes. We anticipate having about 146 pharmacists and technicians in the new facility. So we're excited and we appreciate your kindness. Can I answer any questions?
We will see if there's public comment and see if there is any comments or questions. Nope, no public comment. Council, any comments or questions? Well, we're thrilled that you're here, and we'll make sure that we call a vote this time to be sure that you have that economic development agreement under wraps. So we just really appreciate it, and we know that we're looking forward to having your organization here, your corporate headquarters. Thank you very much. Jenny, will you please call roll?
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
Ms. Cram?
Yes.
Ms. Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Mayor Fox?
Yes.
Vice Mayor DeRosa?
Yes.
Mr. Keeler?
Yes.
This evening, there are no ordinances for first reading. Introduction and public hearing on resolutions. Resolution 40-22.
Accepting the lowest and best bid for the Schwann Falls Drive Bridge Replacement Project.
I'll introduce it.
Our staff report this evening is from the Director of Engineering, Paul Hammersmith.
Good evening, members of council. Staff conducted a competitive bid process for the Schwann Falls Drive Bridge Replacement Project, which will replace the existing structurally deficient 2-lane bridge with a new widened 3-lane bridge, including a 5-foot sidewalk. Additionally, the project scope includes replacing the existing span wire traffic signal at West Bridge Street and Schwann Falls Drive, Corbin's Mills Drive intersection with a new mast arm traffic signal. On July 21st, 2022, 7 bids were received and publicly opened. This project is funded from the 5-year capital improvements program in the amount of $1,625,000 from the annual vehicular bridge maintenance component. Axis Civil Construction LLC submitted the lowest and best bid of $2,092,889.58, which exceeds the budgeted funds. Staff anticipates being able to cover the additional costs using funds previously appropriated as part of the current 5-year CIP and available from one or more projects appropriated in 2022, but that will not proceed this year. And those projects will be included in the 2023-2027 CIP. Staff recommends council approval of this resolution accepting its lowest and best the bid of Axis Civil Construction LLC in the amount of $2,092,889.58 for this project. I'll do my best to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Paul. Do we have any public comment? Council, any questions for Paul this evening? None? Jenny, will you please call the roll? Thank you, Paul.
Ms. Cram?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner?
Yes.
Ms. Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Vice Mayor DeRosa?
Yes.
Mr. Keeler?
Yes.
Mayor Fox?
Yes.
Saludo?
Yes.
Thank you.
Other business this evening is our CIP revenue and debt presentation, and our staff report is from our Finance Director, Matt Stifler.
Thank you. Good evening, members of council. Tonight we begin the 2023 budget cycle. So just to orient you to the current schedule of CIP events, we're having the revenue and estimate discussion today. Next Monday, we will have our first CIP workshop. You should receive the proposed CIP projects tomorrow in your packet for that workshop. We'll have the first hearing of the CIP the following week on the 22nd. Then we'll take a little bit of a break from the CIP, and then we'll resume on September 26th with the second CIP workshop. And we will either pass the CIP at that final meeting in September or at the next hearing, the first hearing in October, unless there are additional changes. Then we'll pass it later in October, I guess. So that is the current schedule as we see it. Tonight's schedule, we're going to talk about the 2022 income tax estimates as well as the 2023 income tax estimate and budget. We will revisit this again during the operating budget discussion. There's a lot going on. A lot can change in a month, and we'll talk about that a little bit when we have that conversation. We'll also talk about revenue estimates for the other funds involved in the CIP, including the general fund, special revenue funds, enterprise funds, et cetera. And then we'll talk about our debt, the proposed debt, what the debt profile looks like, and then policy and metrics associated with the proposed level of debt funding. So we will begin by discussing the 2022 income tax estimate. The news is good. Through the end of last month, which would be July, you will see we are up 6% over 2021. 2021 was a record year of $101.1 million. So being any positive percentage above that number is a great percentage to be. So we are 6% ahead. There's a little bit more complexity to the story than that, and we'll get into that later, but that is an accurate representation of where we currently stand. You can see here on a monthly basis that the month of significant movement in 2022 was really April. That blue bar in April on the fourth month is significantly larger than previous Aprils. You can see that subsequently that red bar in May was a little smaller than the May last year. The green bars look the same, the dark green bars look the same. So we've kind of had a little bit of a change over the last 3 months as compared to how the first 4 months of April started. And that's kind of what I want to look at on some of these subsequent slides. So there's a lot going on here, but the light blue line is the monthly change as compared to last year. And then the monthly change pulls the year-to-date change in that direction, but not by as much as the obvious monthly change. So in January, they're going to start at the same point, because the monthly and the yearly change are identical at that point. You'll see February, we had a monthly change of 0. So February 2022 was identical to February 2021, which pulled that yearly back a little bit. You can see some pretty significant growth in March and April, followed by some subsequent significant decreases in May, June, and July. And those are pulling the annual in those direction. The story here is one of timing. So the filing deadline last year was in May, and the filing deadline this year is in April. So that's a large percentage of that 16 and 19% change. But it's not all of it. But it makes it frustrating because it just adds another layer of complexity into what would otherwise be something we'd really like to know, which is what has been the impact of remote work? And that timing change, unfortunately, corresponds to a change we saw in the finance office involving remote work. We saw some early adopters from Columbus change their withholding. That's how we got ahead in February, March, and April. And then we saw some of our top 10 employers change their withholdings to account for remote work outside of Dublin in May. So we have the timing issue and a change in remote work that's impacting us in May. We don't know how large that remote work impact necessarily is because it was the first month of the change. So was that the new normal or was that a catch-up mechanic? We'd like some more information there. So June was actually good news because we had estimated that remote work would have a negative 7% income impact on our income taxes. So negative 5.3%. Is presumably a good number relative to that budget number. July continued to bring good numbers, almost equal in 22 and 2021, even after accounting for remote work occurring in 2022. So July is actually very encouraging, even though it's only 0.2% negative. The question is that the new normal or is that a timing issue? There's not a lot of data. We essentially have 3 months of good data to kind of say, how does remote work impact Dublin? The first month has a timing issue. The second month may be real. That 5.3% number could be real. July could have a timing issue with 3 paycheck months as well. So that's why I say we're going to revisit this at the operating budget. We'll have September data, or August data at that time. So we'll kind of be able to know a little bit more than what we know currently. But what we know currently is encouraging because there certainly isn't a worst case scenario here. If this is the impact of remote work, this is a very manageable impact. It's not impacting our 2022 budget estimate. And as we'll see, it hasn't negatively impacted our 2023 budget estimate. Just to kind of tell the complete story, I've graphed net profits and individual here as well for review in the slide. You can see, once again, the story of net profits was explosive growth in the first 3 months and not so good month-to-month comparisons in the last 3 months. And that kind of coincides with some of the national economic trends. We started seeing interest rate hikes in March and some of the negative economic news in March. This is going to lag that a little bit. So this kind of shows a picture that is consistent with what we would expect nationally. Individual tax rates, that big change again is a filing date change. It basically shows, if you remove some of the timing effects there, some slight positive growth year over year, but there's not much more going on than that timing component. Overall, when you put all of those graphs together, you get a graph that looks something like this, which shows that, again, as of the end of July, we were up 6%, but you can see that really has been anything but consistent. We have been wildly above that and wildly below it, which makes it hard to say with any confidence that 6% is a really good number. And in fact, we were up 22.9% 4 months ago, and we've been pulled down since that time frame consistently over the last 3 months. So if that's the new normal, what can we expect in 2022? So if we extrapolate the last 3 months, our withholdings would be minus 7.2%, which is actually right on line with our budget number. So actually that number doesn't scare me too much. It's the net profits in individual, which may or may not be a result of national economic forecasts, or could just be a result of timing. And hopefully we'll get some more understanding of what those numbers look like over the next 4 to 6 weeks as we talk about the operating budget. As far as 2022 goes, 2021 actuals were 101.1. We budgeted 94 for that negative 7% in order to take into account remote work. If the next 5 months look like the last 3 months, we will still end up at 101.4 million. So even at our current 3-month trend, we're going to have a very good year relative to budget. Now, the 2023 income tax estimate, we're estimating at this time 2023 taxes as flat as compared to 2022. And I think that probably requires a little bit more explanation. This number has to be locked in basically the middle of June in order to build a CIP for a presentation tonight. So in the middle of June, I'm looking at this graph, only without the last 6 weeks of data, which is actually really good as compared to the 6 weeks that I had to work with. So at this time, 94 seemed like a reasonable conservative estimate. I think there's upward pressure on that estimate, but I'm not ready to commit that we've seen an increase yet. I'd like to look at more data. But I wanted to give you some context to where that 94 came from. And a lot of that is the timing required to make that estimate in order to build a CIP. In recognition of this highly inflationary environment that we're currently in and likely will be in for some time, the prior CIP, I think, used 2% growth. The one prior to that used 1% growth. We are using higher growth estimates. You can't live in an 8% world and project 1% growth. That just isn't reasonable. So we are projecting still conservative, but I think more realistic, 4% growth, 3% growth in the next 2 years, and then 2 and 2, because eventually we will get a hold of inflation. So we're trying to balance that with maybe greater revenue expectations or estimates than we've used in prior CIPs, but we're still not at the 6 and 8% maybe that inflation might be. Additionally, if we're at 101 last year and we're projecting to 101 this year, an estimate that doesn't get us to 101 till the middle year of a CIP, I think, is fairly conservative. Looking at the other revenues, as we've discussed, go ahead.
Hey, Matt, could maybe take a couple questions before we move to the CIP?
Absolutely.
You're not going to be as lucky as the last people. You knew that, right? You knew that, right? We knew that coming in. I had just a couple questions. So back to that graph that you're looking at, the up and down graph. Do we know yet, Matt, or is it too early? If we were to say as an envelope, not individually, as an envelope, say the top 20 employers, do we know if they've made the transitions yet? Because I know a lot of the larger employers, it took them some time to make the transition to withholdings, et cetera, so forth. Do we have a sense that we're through that now and we're watching it, or TBD?
I will get better data. I have a feeling from my conversations with our director of taxation that we're through that with regard to our top 10.
Okay.
But I'd like to confirm that. I know several of them have said they're not going remote work, and a couple of them that were clear that they have, in fact. That happened in May. There are a few that I haven't heard anything about one way or the other, and those are the ones that I'd like to maybe talk about and confirm. But there are, to that end, so there are top 10 that may or may not change, but the state of Ohio hasn't changed. Ohio State hasn't changed. We know that our employers, our residents work at those institutions. At some point, they have to change, and that has to be a net positive to us. But I don't have a timeline on those changes, just as two large employers, for example.
Yeah, and it is, as I understand it, it is the law, right? So it has to occur, right? So that there would be catch up, maybe potential, I don't know, but it's not an option, it's a requirement.
That's
That's
accurate.
correct? Okay, so when we get to that point where everybody's figured out the systems, and it's probably not until that point that we start to see the, if you will, the projection line. Is that a fair?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. I think it's probably another 12 months before we really know if everybody switched and can have any confidence that we're at the new normal. We're just at a transition point between where we were and where we will be. I think we're probably on target. I don't have any sense that we're massively above average and that we should see a significant negative change. We've seen a significant negative change in our top 10, which I think is our impact. So we felt our component. I think the change is elsewhere.
And so my second comment is more of a request, just to follow on with that. I know historically we've had by number of employees, sort of the top 15 or 20 employers. I think it would be interesting to include that in the packet to go forward well. So, hey, thank you. It's a hard one, and appreciate all the work on that. Thank you.
So as council is aware, the CIP is composed of numerous funding sources, which is one of the reasons why it's been more robust than the operating budget in our income tax conversations over the last several years. It includes cash, debt, property tax, grant revenue, TIF revenue, repayment of advances from the general and capital improvements fund, as well as our enterprise and several special revenue funds. So tonight we'll advance each of those and talk about them specifically to provide that information. Just another graph that shows the 2023 income tax estimates as compared to last year's approved 2022. You can see that there is an increase, particularly in 25 and 26. And once again, that's because of the increase in annual percentage growth. When we passed the 2022 budget, we were in a 3% world of inflation, so 1% was reasonable. In an 8% world, 4% is reasonable. As you know, our income tax is divided by the voters into 75% going to the general fund and 25% to the capital improvements fund. Our debt policy further separates that funding into 40% cash projects and 60% is allocated towards debt projects. Putting the numbers to that previous chart, 25% of our income tax is between 23.5 and 26.1 million over the 5 years in this CIP. The 40% allocation is shown in that middle column. The debt service allocation is between 14.1 and 15.7. And most importantly, as far as the debt payments where we are utilizing income tax to make those debt payments, Those are significantly below the debt service allocation, ranging between $7.1 and $8.3 million. So that gives us about $7 to $7.3 million a year in funding that would be allocated to debt that we can use to cash fund projects, which is a significant component of the CIP. That's a significant source of revenue. Property taxes, once again, we have the Parkland and Capital Improvements Tax. These are allocated at their traditional millage, their historic millage of 0.35 mils to the Parkland Acquisition Fund and 1.4 to the Capital Improvements Tax Fund. Property taxes are estimated to be up a few $100,000 from the prior CIP, but overall a pretty flat revenue source there. I did want to note that the fund balance for the Parkland Acquisition Fund is currently $3.7 million. As far as the Capital Improvements Fund, the fund balance ranges from $9.5 million at the start of 2023 down to $200,000 at the end of 2024, or 2025 actually, when that's $136,000 to start the year. And then it goes back up in the outer years. Interest is up from last year because interest rates are up, so the interest estimate is up. Additionally, the fund balance is up because it's taking us a little longer to do projects. Project delays are keeping that money in the fund a little longer, so I'm allowing a little bit of that time delay to increase the funding. So we estimate $600,000. The average interest earned in that fund over the last 5 years is $550. So I think that's a fairly conservative estimate because that $550 was earned at much lower interest rates. We are proposing to transfer $6.25 million from the general fund to the CIP fund for a project next year. That transfer is forecast to be in compliance with the general fund balance requirement policy. We're also utilizing several special revenue funds, the Hotel Motel Fund for Public Art Maintenance. We have some NREC capital projects this year that we're proposing to use the Wireless 911 Fund in 2023. There it is, 2025 rather, sorry. And then the COIC Fund and the Street Maintenance and Repair as well. So there are some special revenue funds included in this CIP. As far as enterprise funds, we will utilize water and sewer debt. We'll talk about those a little bit later, but these are just water and sewer cash. You'll see there's about $80,000 in water and about $300,000 recurring a year from 24 to 27. There are some other sources of funding. We are projecting to receive some federal and state grants. We have some partnership with NREC that we think there are some capital improvements that they should partner with us on. Franklin and Union County are partnering with us on a couple of projects. And we are proposing to utilize our permissive tax that's available at the Franklin County Engineer's Office for the Eiderman Road project this year. We usually find a project about every 3 to 5 years to utilize that funding. So this is a good year to do that. And we do have some unfunded projects in the out years. With regard to Tiff funds, we have a total of $17.3 million programmed over the 5-year CIP. You'll see it's very heavily programmed in the first year of that CIP. These revenues are in addition to the TIF revenues that are paying debt. So there's approximately $7 million of TIF revenue that's paying debt as well that is not included in this spreadsheet. And we are proposing about $14.9 million in advance repayments from our TIF districts to the CIP fund over the 5-year period, pretty equally spread out over the 5 years. With regard to debt issuances, we are proposing debt from an income tax, water, and sewer fund source. The income tax proposal would be $10.1 million in 2023 and $5.7 in 2024. That 5.75 number was the previously approved Riverside Crossing Park Promenade. We were able to cash fund the design of that was funded as debt in the last year's CIP. So that is a change. That 10.1 is for the Tuller Road and Bridge, Emerald Parkway Bridge land acquisition and design costs. So the land acquisition component of that is $10.1 million. The design component of that is $2 million. What we are intending to do, and we'll have this discussion at the workshop, but just to kind of give you a heads up, is use the $2 million that is programmed in the CIP fund for land acquisition to buy down that land cost so that we're financing $8 million in land and $2 million in design. So we reduce our debt issuance by as much as possible since we have that $2 million available. That is certainly something we can and will talk about, but that's kind of our intent to minimize the debt associated with that project. The water fund has water line replacements and then the extensions that are part of our extension policy. The sanitary sewer fund has a significant number of improvements to the Deer Run area, including Riverview Street, Avery Road Relief Sewer, and a Glick Road Relief Sewer. Those relief sewers are all paid for with sewer fund dollars, whereas the sewer line extensions that are programmed there will be paid for with a sewer fund dollar that's actually funded by a transfer from the capital fund. So a little different funding source on those, but we have a significant amount of sewer funding this year. Total resources available total $227.7 million. Total proposed projects are $221.4 million. That doesn't include the advance costs of about $3.3 million, but you can see we have a balanced CIP. It is a positive revenue number as required in each year. This slide is from our Clearview. We're using a new capital budgeting software, as will be discussed in your introductory memo tomorrow, but this is one of the neat graphs that it makes that kind of shows your revenue sources by revenue source and gives you a pie graph. So if you want to see what percentage and what components are making up the revenue that are providing this funding, this graph displays that. This graph displays those sources broken up by year. So you can see there's a lot going on in year one of this CIP, and a lot of different funding sources are comprised of that funding to make these projects move forward. You can see that the purple, which is debt, shows up in year 23 and 24 because that's income tax backed debt. Then we do not have any additional debt scheduled later in this CIP. With regard to debt, our current debt profile I thought I hit it too many times. Our current debt profile from 1991 through 2045 is shown on the screen above. I put an arrow there to demonstrate where we are in 2023 on this debt profile. So this is what has been and what will be if we take on no additional debt for the city of Dublin. What remains in this profile is really water, sewer, income tax, or TIF-backed debt, and then non-tax revenues that NTR, those are the Block B and C parking garages. So those are the only non-tax revenue bonds we have. You can see that our current debt profile is about $186 million, and we pay off between $9 and $10 million of principal per year. For our proposed debt funding, just to recap, we're proposing $10 million, 10.1 in 2023, and 5.7 in 2024 for those projects we discussed a little bit earlier. Those will be retired by either income taxes or they are both eligible for TIF service payment revenues. So as more development occurs in the Bridge Street district, we will be able to move those projects over to a service payment revenue. Pardon me?
I'm sorry, did you say both of those projects can?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So with regard to water funds, the water line replacement will be paid for with funding that is retired from water surcharges, water fees. There are a number of projects shown below, the extension projects that will be paid for by the water fund, but ultimately are funded through a transfer from Fund 401. So if you look at the administration tab and see allocation for water, allocation for sewer extensions, those numbers there are what funds this debt service over this 5-year CIP. Again, with the sewer, we see there's $12.3 million in debt to be repaid by sewer funds and an additional $8.1 million funded through the sewer fund, but ultimately paid for with transfers from 401. So in total, the sewer fund debt for this 5-year CIP is proposed to be $20.4 million. You'll see that there has been some changes in the years associated with the sewer improvements from the last CIP to kind of space these out and make it work a little bit more, because ultimately those sanitary sewer improvements do affect sewer rates. and they do affect the sewer fund. So we just need to make sure that we well balance those projects and any anticipated revenues that we would earn from increasing sewer surcharges. The proposed debt profile with the water, sewer, and income tax debt shown on the previous slide would look like this. Generally, it would be flat for the next 2 years and then would start decreasing after that as more debt is added in 23 and 24. And we pay off about $10 million in principal a year. So 23, it's kind of a net wash. We add 10, we subtract 10. 24, we subtract 10 and add about 6 back on. So that's kind of why it starts out kind of flat and then begins to recede. As far as compliance with our policy, our debt policy requires that we spend no more than 90% of the 60% limit on capital projects. As I stated on an earlier slide, we're spending significantly less than what is our policy limitation. You can see that we have a capacity utilization in that final column of between 56 and 59% over the 5-year CIP, and that there are additional dollars between 5.5 and 5.7 million that could be allocated to debt under our policy. We had discussed several years ago creating debt metrics. So with regard to the debt metrics associated with the debt in the proposed CIP, we are in compliance with all of these metrics, but debt metric 1 is the general fund as a percentage of expenditures. We are above 50% at the end of last year. We ended the year at 64.7, which is in compliance. That general fund balance is 13 million in excess of the requirement, which is well in excess of 50% of the debt payments, which were 3.5 million last year. So this guideline is in compliance. This guideline is a little interesting because we get our first no's. The general fund as a percentage of revenue, you can see that we received a not compliant with this metric in 2019, and we saw another one in 2021. The explanation for those are below. It's not necessarily due to overspending. It is due to an advance in 2019, and then the decision to make a number of one-time land acquisitions in 2021. So I really think what that negative 3.2% is cautioning us to is not to alert us to any debt metric, but to alert us to the fact that we spent a significant sum of general fund balance on land in 2021, which we're all aware of and will hopefully lead to significant growth in future years. But that no is really a reflection of the execution of that policy as opposed to any change in a structural component of our debt or operating budget. And then income tax supported debt as compared to operating revenues, well below the 10% required by this metric, moving from 7.5 to 8.15. And that assumes a 2% growth in operating revenue. I think that's fairly conservative. And that's why you see that percentage go up. If you adjust that growth in operating revenue, that percentage could stay flat or go down. It really is a function of the inputs to the model, not necessarily the reality that we would see those growths or that increase. And that concludes the revenue and debt presentation. So I'm available for any additional questions.
Do we have additional questions or comments for Matt? Kathy?
I had just a couple. Matt, can you remind me, debt issuance this year? Will we do a debt issuance yet this year? No.
We will not do another debt issuance again this year.
Okay. So
Let me take that back. There's still some open discussion on the fiber to the home. And until we resolve that, I don't think we'll know what our plans are in that arena at this time. But I have no, outside of that project, there are no additional debt issuances.
so in a rising debt interest rate era, I mean, the question then becomes, and I think it'll be an interesting discussion at our workshop, about, do we do some of that in this environment ahead of what we know will continue to be some pressure on that for a while? So that'll be an interesting discussion. So sort of a second question, you said revenues you're projecting in this inflationary period of like 4%, 3%, 4%. I know we'll get to this later, but what are you anticipating in the operating expense pressures? 8%, 4%, 3%?
Well, as you know, most of our operating expenditures are salary related, so that will be a decision on that component that we wholly control. So that's really a question, a policy question about 50% of our budget. Then the other 50% that's more contractual and transfer related, about half of that is really economic development agreements and activities that are somewhat insulated from inflationary pressure. So I don't see that we'll see some great increase on that. And we always have the opportunity to tailor our contracts to the increase that we're comfortable with. So I don't know that we have to own an inflationary increase on the other half of our budget. We have to decide kind of what are we interested in and what do we want that to look like? What are we willing to change before we make a determination on what that will really look like?
Matt, do you have an idea of expected debt, when the next debt would happen, sale, and what that number might look like?
The next debt issuance would look like about 10.1, probably around 13 or 14 million dollars would be my guess based on this current CIP. And when it would occur, it wouldn't have to occur. It would have to occur next calendar year because I wouldn't want the 10.1 for the land acquisition to roll calendar years like we did a couple of years ago. I would want to get that done. We could advance that and then pay it back. So I don't know that there's a firm has to occur by, because we have sewer fund revenues and water fund revenues available. We could advance in the interim, and the general fund is such that we could advance that. So we could choose our month. We could go early or late if we made a determination that one would benefit us.
Great, thank you.
We also, just to kind of follow up on Councilmember DeRosa's question and your question, that 10.1 million, we have funded it through long-term debt issuance, but we have had a lot of discussions about short-term debt. And I think when we get to that point, that might be an opportunity. We've used 2 million in land acquisition dollars to buy that 12 down to 10. There might be $3 or $4 million available in the general fund to buy that down further. We might decide to float that for a year or two on short-term interest rates, which are not quite what we're currently paying, and then either buy that down if revenues continue to exceed 100 million. That would be a plan that could work, or finance it at some later time when the Fed finally beats inflation.
Right, and also in the metrics, as you mentioned, as we came down negative in that last metric, land is a great investment. You know, the interest rate hasn't been fabulous. I mean, it's good, but hasn't been fabulous, and land is certainly growing in value, and you pointed that out. So I think that's an important point to make to the public, that this investment in land in the end brings a much higher value, especially economically, when it comes to development. So thanks for pointing that out, Matt. Any other questions? All right. Thank you for that. The next matter of business is our council chamber audiovisual options and recommendations, and that is from our IT director, Michael Farrar.
Good evening, members of council. It's my pleasure here tonight to talk to you about the request that we had to review the current audiovisual solutions that we currently have implemented here in the council chambers, assess what is else out there in the market, and also get a general overview for the future on recommendations on how to move forward. We had the opportunity to work with Jenny Delgado in the clerk's office, as well as Lindsay Weisenauer and Homer Rogers to go through and review our current AV solutions that we have. We also went ahead and reached out to other municipalities to see what solutions they were working with, to see how smoothly or what challenges they were running into. We also reached out for some professional engagement with 2 production companies, one local that we know, which is John with, thank you, Shared Vision, sorry, and also AJ Fox, which is with 543 Production Studios out of Westerville. So they could actually review our current implementation and make any potential recommendations. And I'll go ahead and give a final overview of our findings. So when we looked to the market, there was actually 2, outside of having a fully automated system that we currently operate here, there was 2 other options. One was a hosted remote director solution, which is, in this case, we looked for the leader in the industry, which was called Swagit. It was also a solution being used by Marysville. And we were looking into what that solution could provide. This is a remote team, which is based out of Texas, that would actually completely control the feed, the audio, the cameras, and the stream out to the web. This would also require a whole brand new solution as far as equipment is concerned. So we would have to remove what we currently have. And we would also lose our integration with WebEx and Granicus Live Manager, which we've actually put a significant investment in the last few months. The other option is to have an in-person director. So that's where we have somebody physically sitting here with a control board and a sound board to be able to go ahead and choose camera inputs, audio inputs, and be able to actually direct how the council meeting is moving forward. We reached out to the local video production company, 543 Studios, who does the city of Westerville, and reviewed their solutions with AJ. It would provide an in-person feed and control for audio and visual, and would handle the stream. Again, the equipment that we currently have in place is not compatible, so we would take an investment to go ahead and replace these cameras to be able to have an in-person director solution, and we would also lose our WebEx integration for remote participation. So those were some of the challenges that we found with those particular 2 solutions. The other thing that we did is we did reach out to John with Shared Vision and also AJ with 543 Production Studios to take a look over our previous council meetings that we'd put out for streaming, review the audio and visual qualities on them, and see how the transitions happened. Their reviews were actually very encouraging. The audio is exceptional, they reported back, and the video quality is very good, considering that this is a 100% fully automated solution. Some of the recommendations that they had made, which we took on board and actually implemented, one of them was the placement of the 4th static camera for wide-angle shots. So we have that in place now, and it's been providing, we feel, a much better seamless transition when reviewing and watching the videos either live or on YouTube. We also tried to move away from having the cameras move over and autofocus. We went ahead and we worked with New Era to set our focus values at specific positions. So when any council member or member of public or staff uses the microphone, the camera automatically goes to a select preset. So there's not that in and out of focus or movement. So that was very helpful, especially with the changing of the seasons, lighting positions, etc. So we could always get a much better, clearer shot. The other thing that we would talk to them in depth was they said the thing that came through is that no matter whether you have an in-person, a hosted, remote hosted, or an automated system, glitches do happen, and that they said that for what we're actually operating on, they were very impressed with our current solution. And so their recommendation was to continue to put investment into this without necessarily having to move forward, but with a new solution. But we did also ask them to provide us with numbers so we could provide council the options and understand what the total investment would be if we were to do that. So on this slide, we did reach out and speak with Swagit. The cost that you see here is a $72,000 upfront cost for hardware integration and setting up of the account. There would be an $80,000 investment to remove the current equipment that we have in here, and bringing the total investment to $152,000 with ongoing yearly costs of $15,000 for operating only council meetings. That doesn't include any of the other meetings that we currently support, like our P&Z or ARB meetings that we hold in here. To have a live person here to do an in-person director solution, 543 Production Studios quoted us a $48,000 investment in hardware. Of course, with that $80,000 to remove would give us $120,000 investment in year one with an ongoing yearly cost of $12,000. Again, that's only for the 2 council meetings per month. And then if we were to add any more in, it would be $450 additional per meeting. If we were to go through and remove what we currently have invested here, our total investment so far in council chambers has been $425,000 since we purchased it, plus phase 1 and phase 2 to provide enhancements, not only out in the main lobby area, but also with the additional cameras and the focusing and automation. To remove that with the $80,000 would take our total investment here into the council chambers of $505,000. Does anybody have any questions on that? So as I move forward here to our findings and recommendations, it's staff's recommendation after reviewing our options that we continue to work with New Era and improve our existing system and solutions. We've already proven that the addition of the 4th camera and tweaking the focus areas has dramatically improved the actual audio and visual production when watching it in YouTube. We also are recommending that we are going to look at hiring a full-time dedicated individual to owning AV across the entire city. That would be operating the city, all of the meetings, including the P&Z and ARB and city council meetings, operating the technology, upgrading the technology, and being able to troubleshoot. And that would also move across to the other rooms that we have WebEx integrated solutions across the city. And finally, as we move forward with our investment that we put into Granicus Live Manager, we're going to have a better picture quality. We're going to be able to integrate the actual agendas into the video and be able to tag it along the way. So when we are talking about the different ordinances, they will be there on screen. We'll be able to read and have a synopsis there, but also when you review it, you can click on the agenda to where what specific topic you want to, and the video will automatically jump to that. So that investment will provide much better usability and better functionality for our public. And with that, I would entertain any questions that council has. Thank you.
Council, comments? All right.
Thank you very much for all your work on this. And we appreciate it. It's a new system and the tweaking, et cetera. I think one of the important things is, we talked a lot about the quality of the council. I think the boards and commissions as well, the quality of those videos and the ability to do that. I know we don't have necessarily support in some of those meetings. So the recommendation per this would be, in order to remedy that, would be the addition of staff to manage that. Is that correct? Or I guess my question is, are these enhancements that we're seeing also having an impact on the boards and the commission?
So one thing that we currently are doing is we are having an IT member of staff now attend every additional P&Z ARB meeting to come help set up, make sure that all the WebEx streaming is set up and working correctly, make sure the system's turned on and is ready to present. The thing that it's lacking is after everything's running for about 10, 15 minutes, staff usually leaves. Because if there's going to be a problem, it's usually going to happen right in the beginning. So this would be having a person be here and also be able to adjust and move cameras, be able to go ahead and actually be almost like a director using our current touchpad, but allowing the automation to do 90 to 95% of the work. Just being here to have a subject matter expert, if you will, to own the solution and be able to deliver the highest quality videos possible consistently.
Yeah, I appreciate it because if we're going to make these enhancements, I think it's really important to do that across the board because I know in watching some of those without the hand-on expert here to help, the quality and for a variety of reasons, right? Hasn't been, I think, what we would like it to be. So I think whatever solution, I appreciate very much that it incorporates the entirety of the public meetings that we're having, not just the council meetings. So thank you.
For the initial consultant that we brought in to do this AV work, have we worked with them subsequently to understand why the recommendations were what they were in lieu of what some of these other technologies are?
Sorry, maybe, could you expand on the question? Sorry.
So we hired a consultant and we met with them on several occasions to come up with the technology package that we have. And it came very highly recommended as the proper solution. So have they been re-engaged in this conversation to hold some level of accountability of the solution we were told that we purchased?
So I'm going to look to Jenny because when the council chambers was being built and the consultation for the technology was being done, I was not present with the city at the time. But I believe that was New Era Technologies. Thank you for the confirmation. So yes, we have been working with them and consulting with them consistently through this whole process. And Jenny and I have both had some very interesting conversations with them regarding some of the deliverables that they were supposed to give us initially. And they have done a lot of enhancements, and some of the enhancements that we've requested, they have admittedly said that they missed the mark on, and we were not charged for. So we have been, I feel they've been working with us to get it right when we've been actually looking at adding new things such as the new cameras to get a better camera angle or a wide angle shot. Obviously, there's been costs with that, but I feel that they've been actually very proactive in delivering the services and listening to us the way that we would like it to be delivered. Obviously, this is also an evolution. We're moving into a much larger space than we previously had, and we didn't have any automation before. We're kind of learning along the way. And we're trying to enhance as much as we can in the programming without having to invest a lot more money into the solution. But I feel that we're actually very close right now. Jenny, is there anything you would like to add?
No, I would just add that I think we've done a good job of holding them accountable to what they have promised. I mean, they've told us this is the best technology. We've said, prove it. Back to them. So if there's any glitch, anything, we have them in here, we have them looking at it. And so, yeah, they've been very involved.
Well, I appreciate that, holding them accountable because, it is the public dollar and we put a lot of work in up front to making sure that the system that we were purchasing was the right system. And they certainly assured us that that was the case.
Councilman Keeler.
I guess my only question is if we need a full-time person. I don't know that I would want to lean on staff any more than we do. I think it's important that we have that person to kind of have our back and stay in the meetings for the boards and commissions, because there's nothing worse than a technology failure in the middle of a meeting and us looking at each other like, what do we do next? I guess the question is that a full-time position or part-time position? I wouldn't ask staff to work any more than they already are, which was evident this weekend. So I think we need someone to do that isn't here now. I just question how many hours they would actually need to work.
So with looking at the actual proposed position, we factored in a couple different things. One, we factored in the amount of overtime that our staff has been putting in to attend not only council meetings, but also to be here for the additional committee meetings. We also look at when we have an on-call. So whenever there's a call that's maybe something's gone wrong during a meeting, we have to have somebody come in on an on-call, which is another overtime cost. And the Other thing that we've noticed is that there's certain times in the evening, usually after hours, that there's a predominant, we get higher calls than others. So the proposed position would be it would be an AV, but also a help desk solution. So this position would be a full-time position when the person was not doing any of the actual AV support here for any of the council meetings or running any of the meetings themselves. They would be able to provide a second shift help desk to staff, and also be able to be a strategic partner when we would actually do any of our testing, any of our upgrades, our patching, so they could work on things with our systems administrators and network administrators as they make changes to test and validate prior to staff arriving the next day. So that's we believe that if we remove that that funding from there, plus also we would actually look at adding as a full-time person and removing one of our part-time interns, we could fund this position 100%.
One thing I would add is we're not asking for that position tonight. I think what we're intended to do is make you aware that that'll be an upcoming ask as part of the operating budget, because you'll need to look at additional positions relative to the rest of the budget and what you want to do. I'm sure this is a priority, don't get me wrong, but probably should look at that relative to the other asks as well, just a suggestion. I mean, it wasn't our intent to ask for direction tonight, so.
Thanks. Yeah, so Michael, just relative to what Dana just said, I think it'd be super helpful for us when you come through with that budget request as we're reviewing the budget, is to do that offset. But I would caution to be careful to toss the intern out with the bathwater. Interns can provide a really, really useful service, not just to the city, but also the city to the intern. So if you just remove that intern position, you're going to lose a little something there too. So I would just caution you to really think that through. If that's the right direction to go, then that's the direction you should go. But I also don't want to say, don't do the intern and if you think that's the only way you're going to be able to fund this potential position request. I would suspect that if you take a look at your overtime numbers and things like that, you're probably going to be able to fund a fair bit of this position just by getting rid of those overtime numbers and extra hours, not to mention the softer costs to staff when they have some burnout and things like that, when they don't want to be here, they want to be at home with their families. And I think those are some important pieces to remember as you're thinking through how you're going to bring that to council relative to the budget request.
Yeah, thank you for that input. Absolutely. We currently have 2 interns that we utilize, one year full-time and 1 summer intern. We do find that extremely valuable, and it's reciprocated to them as well. But we are currently in the middle of a financial assessment to actually review all the hours that we're putting in from an overtime perspective, so we can bring that with our proposal when we come to operating. But I do thank you those comments, and I will keep those in mind.
You have a comment? I just want to say I appreciate the homework that you've done on all this, because from the beginning, when we first opened the chamber, the quality has improved greatly by just going through this process of understanding how we can get rid of the focus issues and the wide angle. And certainly we don't want to lose the transparency with the WebEx and the ability, if we ever have another instance where we have to go, remote, I think to just go through this process and understand how we can squeak the most out of this system that we pay quite a bit of money for, almost $500,000. And to be able now to improve it with subtitles and to be able to track where you want to be in a meeting so people don't have to watch the whole thing. All of those are, great advances that we wouldn't have had if we hadn't gone through this process. So I thank you for that very much. I would like to make a motion to accept staff's recommendations regarding the chamber technology. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Jenny, will you please call roll?
Ms. Aludo,
Yes.
Mayor Fox,
Yes.
Mr. Reiner,
Yes.
Ms. Cram,
Yes.
Ms. Ambrose Grooms.
Yes.
Vice Mayor DeRosa.
Yes.
Mr. Keeler.
Yes.
Staff comments this evening, Dana?
I'm sure you'll all probably echo this, but we're all significantly numb still from the weekend, but brains are working. But anyway, I just want to take the opportunity to say thanks to everyone for a successful Dublin Irish Festival. Obviously, the staff, all of our over 1,000 volunteers, and the community as a whole who all came out. I thought it was just a great opportunity for community coming together. And certainly everyone was out there expressing the opportunity to be together again. And I thought it was a great sense of community and terrific festival. So just thanks to everybody for all their hard work and preparing for, executing, and now cleaning up after that major event. So appreciate your support as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Our council committee report this evening will just be from the Administrative Committee. Vice Mayor DeRosa.
Yes, thank you. As you will recall, 3 or 4 years ago, we added a joint council, board, and commission agenda, a meeting to our annual council meeting. And at the last administrating committee meeting on August the 1st, we took the opportunity to pull together in some discussions a suggested agenda for that meeting. That is before you or was given to you in your board pack. I'm not going to read it all, but at the administration committee, the thought was, and the suggestion to bring back for your consideration and edit this evening, was to really sort of divide that discussion, which is planned for the 31st of August between council and all board and commission members, is to discuss sort of 2 big areas. One would be council updates and new policies. One of the discussions at the administration committee meeting is we thought it might be helpful to share with the boards and commissions the recent work on the 2022 goals and visions statements. So Jenny Roush will provide a very brief update to that. And then there's a set of policy areas for discussion that was pulled together, as you know, from requests from Jenny for your feedback about ideas, et cetera. So those are sort of the first half of that agenda. The second would be then respectfully for the boards and commissions, their topics. And those were gathered from staff's discussion with board and commission members. So we're bringing this forward tonight from the admin committee to get your thoughts and ideas, and then we can get this out to both staff and our fellow board and commission members so we can prepare for that discussion on the 31st. So thoughts, comments, additions?
I just had one question. I was under the impression we were going to keep it a little more generic. So rather than say gain council's direction, because we weren't going to sit here and give them direction, that we were going to ask them their opinion on these things. That's kind of what I thought we had come to a conclusion on, and maybe I misunderstood.
You know what? It's only that you're talking about that point A under number 4.
Yeah.
You're right.
That's the wording of those. I thought it was, hey, you
You're
guys
right.
brought these up. Tell us what you mean. We're not
you're right.
actually giving you direction on them during this.
Yes, thank you. So that phrase should be discussion around. Thank you, Amy. Yes, that was indeed the discussion there. Yes, thank you for that. Other comments?
I just have one. Are there other comments? Okay. I just have one. One of the things that one of the topics that came up, and we've discussed this here some, and I know it's been a question for planning and zoning, is the policy on green space and development, and whether or not the retention ponds would be considered part of the green space requirement. And historically, I've heard that it was not so, but it has been so in recent years. So this is a question that may come up, and I don't know if that's something we need to settle before, or at least discuss before we have an opportunity to have that board and commission meeting. I'm not going to be able to attend that meeting, but I just wondered if that's something that you might get a question on. So could I just get a little background information from you, Councilman Reiner, on?
Yeah, no, I think it's an important issue. I don't know whether we should have a sidebar meeting with them on some of these things about planning and zoning, what's to be expected, or we're going to add these into the topics because there's a number of ideas. I think we've all had, all those who've served on planning and zoning, on what we could do to might help them in the process of making these decisions. So,
I would also add that's probably a staff level conversation because they're the ones doing the calculations of what the green space are. And I think that's probably a policy decision that this body should make, whether we're going to count those things or not. So, I don't know that that would be a terribly fruitful thing to be in conversation with them about at this point. But I think maybe it would be something that we should add to a workshop agenda. And we should come up with the policy of what is going to be considered as part of these calculations and give that to staff for them to execute when they do those calculations. I mean, the planning commission or the ARB or whoever the body might be can't be doing those calculations on their own. That has to be a staff level calculation that's given to them as a portion of the planning report.
You know,
I'm sorry, are we not discussing retention ponds at the next public service?
On Wednesday, we have the stormwater maintenance. It's not related to calculation of green space. It was the grant, the program we had for the stormwater maintenance.
we could have a community development committee meeting with them and cover these items, setbacks, some of the things that, that have come up in different zonings. So we could move it over to community development. We still have we have a potential meeting yet for this month.
And you chair that committee, so you can add that to the agenda.
Pardon?
And you chair that committee, so you can add that to the agenda.
Yeah, we could enjoy another evening together.
So we agree that we would refer this to the Community Development Committee as maybe possibly adding it to one of their future agendas?
Yeah.
All right,
Fine by me.
all right.
Real quick, there are other topics that we need to explore as a council, one of which is the historic district preservation and that kind of thing. Councilmember Cram is probably the best suited to have that discussion. It can be a CDC forum as well. How could she contribute to that commission?
Perhaps in that instance, it may be a full workshop discussion topic just because of that, then for that full participation, that might be the easiest scenario there.
That'll be on the 29th work session. Just your discussion about preservation, which is just 2 days before this. So I don't know if you'll be ready to tee that topic up or not, but you'll have a discussion about it on the 29th.
And that's a all council work session. And I think we had also had some housing proximity to outer belts, things like that on that we were wanting to discuss as alongside that issue.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
So with the thank you correction from Amy on the wording on one of these, are we comfortable on that this would be a meaty set of discussions for the August 31st meeting? Okay. And so I don't think we need any type of motion. I think we're just getting a head nod here for agenda setting. I believe that is correct. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we will have roundtable. Councilman Aluda, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sure we'll hear lots of accolades about the Irish Festival. Thank you. Huge thank you to staff, as well as the over 1,300 volunteers that we have. Staff had to be very nimble and agile on Sunday with the weather, and they did an incredible job. So to Allison and everyone else who makes all of that happen, a big, huge thank you. And thank you for keeping everybody safe. Thanks to the police. They did an amazing job with the crazy rain we had yesterday. So just kudos all around. Also, just a quick reminder that school starts next week. Yay for all of us parents. But just my annual reminder to just keep your eyes out for those kiddos as they get used to their new bus schedules and everything else. It's always a fun time, but it's always a nervous time with all the cars and everything. So take care, keep everybody safe. Thanks.
I would echo all those thoughts regarding the Irish Festival. Certainly painted the community in a wonderful light. I would only add congratulations to our honorary chair, Jason Liu, and his celebration of that. It was really fun to see he and his wife out and about and enjoying that. I hope that they took the opportunity to soak up all the affection that we have for them and how thankful we are that they're part of our community. And I also like to congratulate Reverend Steve Norden on his retirement, and the police department did a wonderful service for him. So he has certainly been a stalwart of this community for many, many years. And as much as we will miss him, we wish him Godspeed and a happy retirement.
I don't have anything additional. Thank you.
Councilman Keeler?
So it's going to sound like a broken record in here. Everybody thanking staff for their incredible work over the weekend. In case you haven't noticed, the work isn't done. There's a lot of stuff to tear down, but long hours. I think some of the folks I talked to were there at 7 a.m. and didn't leave until 12:30. That's a really long day. Huge success. I ventured out of my comfort zone into the south area late one night and was just blown away by the amount of people, the volume of people, and the energy. I'd like to thank staff not only for the work around the festival, but also helping Rotary, Dublin AM Rotary, plant that peace pole in the ground. I know that's a lot of work, and we really appreciate that. Thank you.
Just to repeat, I just want to thank staff. Amazing project, amazing amount of complexity to the project. If you look at the electric, the contracts for all the vendors, the tenting and everything else. So hands to y'all. It was just a wonderful endeavor, and thank God the weather sort of helped us out, except for a little rain Sunday afternoon. Thank you.
Mayor DeMosa, Vice Mayor DeRosa?
I will echo my thanks. I was standing there at the very beginning before the kickoff, and I tried to imagine how many possible moving parts that the staff had to bring together all at once. And I know there were probably some that happened at the very last minute and some that did, but just if you stand and reflect on the total number of moving parts that all had to work together, and it's just miraculous. And my other comment is it was just wonderful to see all the smiles on everybody's faces. You didn't know how much you missed it until you had it back again. And so it was just a wonderful, joyous event. And we, as council, as you've heard, cannot thank you enough for all of the commitment and all of the volunteers. And people, say this is what makes Dublin, Dublin. So thank you.
I will be a broken record too, but I will say that the city just glowed green. It just shined, and all the staff worked so hard. But thank you to our police department. Everyone felt safe and comfortable and relaxed. Our township fire department, Washington Township, did a great job of helping everybody with the heat and Band-Aids for those sore blisters on their feet. The volunteers, 1,300 plus volunteers. What other city in the whole Central Ohio region can say that they can bring 1,300 volunteers to help with an event? So thank you so much. And on the heels of that, I'm going to give you some very good news. The Friendship City request that we made, we got a response back. And a lady by the name of Francia Gibson, who is now taking care of international relations in the Dublin City Council in Dublin, Ireland, said that she received a very favorable request from the ambassador of Ireland, Dan Mulhall, and that also there's been favorable requests from past mayors of Dublin who have attended the Irish Festival here and said that it was fabulous. So they are going to consider our request to extend our agreement. And they asked that that in order to do so, that we meet some of their mission statement. So if this doesn't sound familiar, and I won't read it all, but if this doesn't sound familiar, I don't know how they could turn us down, actually. To drive a sustainable development of the city through strong civic leadership and delivery of effective services that promote the well-being and quality of life of citizens and communities. I think we're going to nail that, right? And the points quickly are working towards achieving a green, low-carbon city, building safe, thriving neighborhoods, continuing to grow a strong, diverse economy, promoting compact growth and connected infrastructure, supporting and engaging active, inclusive communities, sustaining a vibrant cultural life. Really, the Irish Festival, how could they turn us down? Becoming a responsive, innovative city council. They sound like a soul sister to me. So I'm hoping that they will return with a very favorable comment, and staff will be following up on their request for us to prove our worth. But I think we can just end it with sláinte, and hopefully we'll get a great response. So the only other things I have to say is that there is an OMA meeting on August 18th. PAMA will meet on September 2nd. And as for that, I thank you all
Mayor,
very much.
Mayor, can I
Oh,
just
is there more?
interject? So, sorry, I was trying to get your attention. So, I mean, I think it was the direction of council to try to renew our friendship city arrangement with Dublin, Ireland. Is everyone in agreement with that? So, okay, so we'll get that application. I just wanted to make sure everyone was on.
Right. Yeah, this
Okay,
isn't
thank
Sister City. This is the friendship agreement.
Okay,
Right.
appreciate it. Thank you.
So, all right, everyone have a good evening and thank you. This
We have to go to.
do we have to, oh, I'm sorry, we do have to do that. I will make a motion. We are going to adjourn to executive session for the purposes of a personnel matter considering the employment of a public employee. May I have a second?
Second.
Jenny, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor DeRosa?
Yes.
Ms. Cram?
Yes.
Mr. Keeler?
Yes.
Mayor Fox?
Yes.
Ms. Ambrose Grooms?
Yes.
Mr. Reiner? Yes. Ms. Aludo?
Yes.
And for public information, we will not be taking any further action this evening. We will be reconvening only to adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.